Welcome to the Clean Library Podcast, where content meets conscience. We believe there are millions of you readers out there desperately searching for a better way to find clean content. Each episode, we will introduce you to a new author of clean books, giving you, your family, and your friends clean options. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Clean Library Podcast. Today, we have special guest, author Michael Colon. Michael was born and raised in New York City. He is a novelist and a freelance writer. His author story is about hard work, perseverance, and believing in the power of imagination. His inspiration comes from various societal elements, the beauty and cultural differences, and his own life experiences. Outside of writing, he enjoys working out, watching sports, and going on hiking trails with his wife. Welcome, Mike. Thanks for being on the show with us tonight.
Marcus, Brock, thank you for having me.
Yeah,
Appreciate
absolutely.
it.
So let's jump into your two truths and a lie first and see if we can weave these topics into our conversation. All right. So number one, I played in a pickup basketball game with Jamie Foxx. All right.
Oh, all right.
All right. Number two, I didn't go to my high school prom. And number three, I found $50 under a vending machine once. That sounds like a good day. All right. So at the end, we'll see if we can figure out which one is the lie there. So as we jump into it, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and why you decided to become an author?
Definitely. Born and raised in New York City, born and raised in the Bronx in Co-op City. Um, I'm very much into sports, athletics. I grew up playing basketball a lot. I actually wanted to be a professional basketball player when I was a kid, like most other New York City kids who, live near a basketball court. So, yeah, basketball was my life for a while. I played on a few teams, and at some point that hit its ceiling, and I was thinking, what else do I want to do to express myself, like just my full self? And eventually, I started getting into writing, but I wasn't taking it serious then.
Yeah.
I'm talking about my early 20s. And not too long ago, I started taking writing more seriously because it's just a really great outlet for me.
Right.
Just being able to express myself in an artistic way. So, it just felt like a natural. It just felt natural.
Okay. So was it like, first off, I'm going to be a novelist and write books, or did you try to get into journalism or other kind of freelance stuff first?
First, it was freelance stuff. I started off writing poetry, uh, essays, content for blogs and other online magazines. I was just kind of pouring my heart out, writing about topics that I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
And I kind of didn't have high expectations. I was just doing it because I just like to do it. And one day I was like, let me try sending these out to like magazines and, different platforms. And once I noticed that they started to accept my art, my work, I started to go along with the momentum of being a writer.
Cool. So was there a specific source that you went to find the different like opportunities and stuff, or were you just like randomly shooting stuff out to different magazines and hoping for the best?
A little bit of both. Um, Definitely Google search to the fullest. Just if let's just say I wrote a poem, and depending on the theme of the poem, I would use keywords in my Google search to look up specific magazines or blogs towards that topic. And literally, either at work or at home, I would grab a pen, paper, and just write down emails. Uh, Send my workout, work on my pitch, which is also very important.
Yeah.
And eventually, people would either reject it or take it on, and it was kind of fun. Like it's kind of a thrill, like getting that email saying, we love this, we'll post it on our website or magazine, and that feeling kind of became addicting after a while.
That's good because, I mean, I'm sure you got a lot of rejections too, as most writers do.
Oh yeah.
So it's good that you focused on the positive ones as your fuel instead of the negative ones.
Well, you have to, and I'm glad you brought that up. When it comes to rejection from magazines, publishers, you can't take it personal because at the end of the day, everybody has their own taste. That doesn't mean that your work is bad.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it can be assigned to tweak certain things, but for the most part, yeah, you can't just focus on the rejection or you won't go far.
Yeah. That's great advice. Have you gotten into any ghostwriting for other people as well, or like assigned, or do you have magazines that give you assigned topics, or is it still just this is what I want to write about and you send it out?
Yeah, the latter. It's pretty much what I want to write about, and I'll send it out. I never really thought about ghostwriting. The most that I'm really open for is magazines who will pay me to like maybe write content for them.
Uh-huh.
But ever since I got my novel published, um, I'm very much going that route of marketing my book. I'm really just focused on my book now and other projects similar. I'll always do freelance, but
Yeah.
it's not the forefront right now.
Yeah. So tell us about your book then.
Yes, so the gift from Alias, I actually have it right here.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, so the gift from Alias is a sci-fi tale. It's based in a dystopian future, and it's centered around the conflict between man and artificial intelligence. In the book, I don't use the word robot because I feel like most sci-fi authors or movies, it's kind of like the same terminology. So
Yeah.
I went ahead and dubbed it Codex Units, just for the creative aspect of it. And the main character, A191, who's a Codex unit, uh, lives in the machine city called Paradise. And it's basically a city where humans exiled artificial intelligent beings like himself because they basically used them to build their utopias and said, okay, we don't need you guys anymore. They banished them to the far corner of the planet in the middle of a desert where they have to basically build their own city and stay there. And the main character, A191, is very different from his kind. As the story goes along, you figure out why that is, but his goal is to have both dominant species just be united again, like they used to be in the past.
Cool.
That sounds awesome. Yeah. How did so I'm fascinated by this. How did you go from writing, pieces for magazines and other things that you're passionate about? What was that journey like to discovering this story that you wanted to actually turn into a novel?
I feel like I always had the ideas for these novels, or this one in particular. It's just at the time, while I was doing the freelance writing, I was focused on building my portfolio because I know like that will help in the future,
Hmm.
and it has been now. But I always had the ideas. It's just I wasn't like giving it my full attention at the time. It was just here and there, adding things, and honestly, when like just thinking about like publishing a novel, it was like, okay, maybe that's beyond my capabilities. Because when you think about it from that perspective, like, I'm getting essays published, a short story here and there, but a novel, at that time I was like, you know what, it's an idea, but maybe my confidence wasn't right, at that season, during my creative process. So uh, eventually I just was like, you know what, like these seem like really great ideas, and let's just kind of make that next step and not be afraid.
Yeah. I mean, that's really what it's about, is that overcoming that initial fear of can I actually do this, and then doing it, you know?
I agree.
Yeah. So in, in the sci-fi genre, like how did you like what kind of research did you do to go with the futuristic world, but also, you know, tech that I mean, because we're in that AI revolution right now. So how did you meld those the realism versus the future and all that stuff?
Well, I knew my place, and what I mean by that is like, I'm a fiction author, so
Yeah.
I kind of let the fiction of the story um, become more of a focal point than like being too technical with like the AI part. Because as I would write the story, there were certain things like, okay, let me like look up, for instance, like with the codex units, like they're machines, so let me do a Google search and look up certain terms. I would say that's as far as it went, like just looking up certain terms to fit into dialogue and plot schemes. But again, like I know my place. I'm definitely not an AI expert. I'm not a tech expert. I was just kind of filling in the blanks here and there for certain terms as I was writing the story.
Yeah, yeah. I think well, and character drives the stories, right? I mean, you look at some of the most famous sci-fi books that are still popular today. They're based on an author's like a time when stuff the author couldn't even think of things that are real today, and
Right. Yeah.
so but they still are popular because of the story
Yes.
and the characters. Um, I mean, I always love when you watch Star Wars, which is supposed to be set in the future, but they have all these lights and buttons and massive computers that can't even
Doesn't look too
imagine.
much like the future.
Right. Yeah, it's ancient history, but people still love it
Of course.
because it's still cool, and they still stick with that same aesthetic in current shows because that's what Star Wars is. That's kind of
Definitely.
yeah. So, are you? Did you plot the whole thing out before you started, or is it what kind of writer are you?
I would say I'm more on the side of letting the story tell itself.
Okay.
I feel like, you start with a concrete idea or ideas. It doesn't have to be one idea. And, when it comes to writing fiction, at least for me, I don't want to overthink it too much. I kind of want to just, because, you'll be stuck on page one and you'll never go to page two thinking about, oh, how does this sound? This is supposed to be like this. I think you just have to let go and, not worry about like the technicalities, as of yet. And eventually like the characters in the story tell itself and you become the vessel. So that's kind of how I go about it.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. So, was there a point where, like, you made a conscious decision to keep your book relatively clean, or was it just a natural thing for you? How did that work for you?
I think it's a natural thing. I mean, the book, I wouldn't say it's, completely PG,
Yeah,
but there's no like, for a fiction book that's set in a dystopian world where, AI and people are at war, basically like there's not vulgar language in it,
yeah,
and I feel like there's an art to that. Like if you could tell a great story without having to like abuse certain languages or like aggressive or violent scenes, like that makes it more impactful. I feel like because the reader will appreciate like the deep story plots even more, especially because you don't really see that nowadays. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. No, that makes sense, and I think, I mean, that's something that we find more and more as we're talking. As we're doing new episodes of the show and talking to other authors, that it really takes almost more craft to be able to tell that story without it. And when we say clean, we don't mean a kid's cartoon. You know, I think but I think you nailed it. It doesn't have to have a bunch of language in it. The violence doesn't have to be graphic or gory in order to have a battle scene and that kind of thing. Um,
yeah, especially because this book, like, on the surface, you get the sci-fi genre,
yeah,
but it's really like a very philosophical tale of, you know, a main character trying to find his purpose and deeper meaning. So I feel like when you back your story with like very deep narratives
hmm,
that the reader could connect to, like you don't have to, drop f bombs all over the place
right,
or anything like that. Because it get, honestly, like even with movies, like I can't watch a movie where like it's just swearing and too gory. Like it becomes like okay, I get it, I get it. So I completely agree with you on that.
Yeah. And I love that you said connecting with your audience, right? Because as you think about who the larger audience you want to connect with is an audience generally that's going to probably lean more towards something that isn't as graphic, right? Because then you can have it introduced to younger audiences and your story can connect with a lot more people, which again, like Marcus said, we're finding more and more as we talk to people that that's generally what happens too, right? Is you broaden your reader base as you write about something, one, that you're passionate about, that's got, great character development and a good story, and isn't extreme and graphic from that standpoint, right? So
Yeah.
I
that's
completely
cool.
agree.
Yeah, I mean, like, even in movies, just this week, my wife and I were like, hey, what do we want to do this weekend? Are there any good movies out? Because we love going to movies. And like, even the Valentine rom com movies this year are all R, every one of
Yeah,
them. like,
yeah. Oh, I can't.
like
Yeah.
even for Valentine's Day, come on. And and I that's it's weird to me because and maybe it's just this world that we're in because this is our focus. Um, but it feels to me like that's not the direction that people want to go. That's not the content people actually want, but Hollywood keeps pushing it. Big publishers keep pushing it. And like, is that are you pushing it because it's what people want, or is it I don't know. It just maybe
Well,
I
and
feel like
on that, Marcus, on that, actually, that's I was going to ask Mike, if did you find any barriers to sort of entry into getting your book published, or getting it out there, because it didn't meet the driving need of maybe some more graphic content?
Uh, I don't think so, and I wouldn't know because when I'm emailing and pitching publishers and agents, you know, if I get a denial, it's usually like, oh, seems like a great story, but we're kind of full, or you won't hear anything back. So
right.
I never
Gotcha.
got that directly, uh, but I definitely get your point of a lot of publishers who want more of you know the violence. Uh, but again, I feel like depending on how you pitch it, because I feel like there's an art to that as well.
Hmm.
Your pitch could really like determine whether or not a publisher or an agent will want to even read your book, regardless if it's violent or not.
Yeah. So how did you learn how to do a good pitch? Because clearly you were successful.
Yeah, research again. I honestly, most of the stuff leading up to this point, nobody taught me.
Hmm.
I don't have people who like said, okay, Mike, do this, do A, B, C, D. I literally did the work and researched a lot. And there's a lot of information on the internet. Obviously, you
Yeah.
can get lost in a lot of tips and different techniques. But I pretty much just did a lot of research and gathered like the consistent info that I was getting, and made a draft query letter,
Hmm.
and pretty much just saved it to like my notes, and I would tweak it here and there, and just try to keep things simple too. Don't overcomplicate things, and
Yeah.
I would just use that draft and tweak it, every now and then, depending on who I was sending it to.
Yeah. So how many did you have to send it to before you finally got the yes?
I lost count. Yeah, I definitely lost count. Dozens,
Yeah.
dozens on dozens. Yeah, I wouldn't even be able to tell you a number. I hope it's not too high. I would like to think so, but I'm pretty sure it's a number that would surprise me.
Yeah. So did you ever think about just saying, forget it, I'm gonna self-publish?
So I told myself that was going to be my last resort.
Okay.
The problem with me is I could be very stubborn, and that last resort is way off in the distance. So I'm the type where I would have to literally be rejected by every single agent on planet Earth before, I go to my plan, my last plan. So I never really felt like any quit. I
Yeah.
honestly, I feel like if you knock on the door enough, somebody has to open it. It just might take a very long time, and
Right.
the reason why I didn't go the self-publishing route is because I felt like with this book, it wouldn't do the justice
Okay.
of just going it on Amazon and like, okay, it's in the sea of other self-published books. That, I mean, that's a whole nother thing. But yeah, I just really wanted to get this story, this manuscript at the time, backed by a publisher.
Cool. Yeah, and I think there's no right or wrong answer. It's up to the author which avenue is going to work best for them, obviously. And have you found that working with a publisher is what you expected it would be?
Uh, Not really, because I feel like as a new author, you think you have an idea,
Mm-hmm.
um, but it's not until you're going through the process where like you're kind of learning on the go. Again, unless like other authors and they literally break down the process for you and you have insight into these corporations or these publishing houses. Luckily for me, the publisher, TWB Press,
Mm-hmm.
the guy I was working with, really like broke it down for me and guided me through the process of the different editing and us emailing the PDF files back and forth and the cover and uh, I'm really grateful for TWB, because they definitely made the process not as intimidating.
That's awesome. That's good to hear. Um, did you did you get much input on the cover design and stuff?
Not really. I kind of gave the publisher an idea,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, they sent me a few like pieces of art in the email, and I just went along with the one I went with. I feel like it depicts the main theme of the story. But I did research that, like, unless like you're like an author that they're really gonna like. I'm talking about for like a big publishing house, like
Right. Right.
top five publishing house. Like usually you'll have some input, but from what I heard, like they usually take care of that,
Mm-hmm.
which is fine. I'm not an artist, so
Right. Right. And
in that
that's
regard,
just one more burden you don't have to worry about when you've got a publishing house to help you out with that, and you don't have to find an editor. You don't have to like.
and that's the thing with self-publishing too. Because again, there's no, like you said, there's no right or wrong way to do it. I think you just have to know like what you're capable of depending on the route you take. Because if you're gonna go the self-publishing route, like you got to wear multiple hats. Like you're the author, you're the marketing guy, you're the artist. So there's definitely a lot of hats that you got to be prepared to wear. And I had to kind of be honest with myself. Like I don't have these tools
Right.
to be able to self-publish a book and let it be successful.
And it's very difficult for a lot of people to be that honest with themselves of what they're actually capable of doing. So that's very commendable that you're you're able to say, look, this is my thing.
Definitely.
Because I think that's a lot of a lot of people say, great, I'm going to do it. I'm going to learn how to do it, and it's they fail and they wonder why. It's because they weren't being honest with themselves. That this is not a strength that they have. It's not a skill that they're going to learn. Um, I know, like we're we're working on another project, and um, I really want to be able to code so I can work on this project, but it's just like that's not my thing. And
Right.
I've tried multiple times to sit down and oh maybe I should take a course and I can do it. And I last a couple hours and I'm like, why do you keep doing this? This is not you. This is not your strength. Find someone who is good at this to do that part, you know?
Yeah. I mean, coding sounds cool until you sit down in front of your computer and you just see the matrix on your
Right.
screen.
And I imagine there are a lot of coders who wish they could sit down and write a novel too, and they try and can't. I mean,
True.
writing
Very true.
it's a separate skill set.
Yep. That's why there's a market where we all can do the thing we're good at.
That's why we pay the people we need to pay for certain things.
Exactly right. So is there an audiobook in the works or is that part of what they offer? Or?
Uh, I would say, that's something that me and my publisher have to talk about.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I would definitely, highly consider having an audiobook. For now, we're just trying to market like the Kindle and the physical copy. But I believe if you download the Kindle app, I believe there is an audio feature you could use on the app to read the book back.
Yeah.
I might be wrong, but hopefully there is. But that's definitely something that we would want.
Yeah. There's a narrator function, but it sounds like it doesn't sound like an actual actor like an audiobook does, but
Gotcha.
it, um, and that's always that next step, and it's a big hurdle. It's almost like you climb this mountain to get your book published, and then there's this even higher mountain on the other side for the audiobook, just because it takes so much more to get it there that you're not ready for. So I hope that your publisher will help you with that, or at least guide you to where you can get that done, because there are a lot of people. I mean, I'm one of them, that I have a lot more time to listen to books than I do to sit down and read books.
No, I totally understand.
Yeah. So, is there something, if you were looking back on when you first decided, all right, I want to be a writer, is there something your current self, some advice your current self would give your past self, that you wish you would have known?
Yeah, I would say like the main piece of advice that I would give my past self is like, don't be afraid, have confidence in yourself. I would say like for me growing up, like, I didn't really have a lot of self-esteem. I was very timid, very afraid to step out of my comfort zone and like the bubble that I set in place.
Mm-hmm.
So I would definitely tell my younger self, like, hey, like, you're more talented than you think, and you're, better than what you give yourself credit for. Um, and I would just be as honest as I can, because I feel like my younger self definitely needed uh, like somebody to really, not that I didn't have people like that.
Mm-hmm.
I give my mom, a lot of credit for that. But at the end of the day, like in the context of, the question, I would definitely tell my younger self, like, hey, like, if you just step out of your comfort zone just a little bit, like you'll be like making these strides towards like goals that you would be like, oh wow, like this, I didn't think that I could do this.
Yeah. Do you guys have kids yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's while you were saying that, I was just thinking about, just as a, like, from a parent's perspective, that's that's a tough lesson as a parent to teach your kid, because you have to, go for it, take risks, but don't, not too risky. You want to be careful, but take risks, and you don't want to see them get hurt or fail, but on the other hand, you kind of want them to, because that's how they learn. Because,
That's how they learn.
yeah,
You're
it's
right.
it's tough, and especially like when mine are now adults, so when they're in college, and going out into the world looking for jobs, and saying, you got to go out there, you got to knock on doors, you got to make phone calls, like, no one's going to come to you to offer you a job. You have to go out and find it. You have to go out and convince somebody that you're the person they want to hire, and that's that's a difficult lesson to teach, just in general. But then when you've got kids who, they're not used to going out and talking to people, because it's all right there on their phone, that's a skill that
Yeah.
they've got to learn. So
No, I agree. I
that's
agree,
great
and I
advice.
think with kids, um, no matter how old they get, from what I hear, they're always going to be your kids,
Oh yeah.
that your babies that you're used to protecting and having to, you know, be extra cautious with. But I completely agree. God willing, if me and my wife are blessed with kids, I know that there's no manual for this.
Yep.
You just got to do your best, and nobody's perfect at it. But yeah, I also agree with what you mentioned about kids nowadays, the generation nowadays, where I feel like our generation, it's like we went outside, we took certain risks just by interacting with other kids. I mean, with me again, like I was a little bit more shy, but I still went outside and like played. And I feel like nowadays, like you know, everything is on a tablet. Information could be accessed so quickly that the human to human element isn't as there, or isn't there as much than for
Yeah.
us.
Yeah, and I think, and I don't say that to belittle them. Like, I'm absolutely not one who, like, talks down to, because I think they're awesome, and they're hard workers, and they want to succeed, and they have great ideas, but there's just a skill set that's different, that they not have as much experience in, that they have to learn at a later age than we did, you know?
Yeah, there's good and bad with everything.
Yeah.
And I will say what's been fascinating to me through the whole process of starting this podcast and talking to so many authors is learning what a resilient group it is, right? And so like even in the way that you've spoken since we started this, right? You have a very mature outlook on rejection and doing what you're passionate about and following through and even needing to be a little stubborn, right, to get to where you're going. And so I think that's one of the coolest things about authors, and is how much rejection is required in order to be successful. And even sometimes to call it successful, by any normal standard is sometimes, like you get it published, but then you're hoping people buy it, and you're hoping people read it, and you're hoping people like it. So if anything prepares you to be a good father and a good parent, I think you've got a great baseline based on
Yeah.
your tenacity to follow through with this, right? Because again, authors, to me, I have all sorts of respect for the amount of rejection that they handle and still see it through.
No, and I definitely appreciate that. I definitely appreciate that, and I completely agree. It's character building.
Yeah.
It's the only way, like, if you want to sharpen a sword, like it's going to have to be, forged. And that forging process, it could be painful, it could be scary. But at the end of the day, like eventually you get to a point where like you get rejection. And it got to a point for me, like I would see an email and I would just smile. It's almost like you have to reach that point of like, it really doesn't bother you anymore.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, good. Okay, good.
Right.
Rejection.
One more
That's good.
down.
Yeah,
Love it.
exactly. Definitely.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. Um, and sometimes I remind myself that there are authors and artists, some of the most well-known artists in history, were never sold anything while they were alive, and now they've become famous because you're creating a work of art in the form of a book, um, and that transcends how long you live or the people you know, and you're adding to the library of art in the world. And maybe you could become famous now and you live a lavish life on your royalties, or maybe you don't. But either way, you've contributed to that library of art in the world.
That I so agree with that. It's the footprints you're leaving behind.
Yeah.
It's like musicians, when they, you have a lot of songs that stand the test of time from decades back. You know, whether it's music, writing a book, making a film, it's art, like a painting. You go to a museum, a lot of these paintings have been around since, people rode around in horses and buggies, or even before then, probably when painting was invented. Some of these paintings are still around, and um, you're leaving a legacy behind. And like you said, whether you make millions right off the bat or it's something that, maybe comes back around later on, the point is that's the whole purpose of this life. I mean, I don't want to simplify it, but it's like it
Right.
is really what you leave behind. um, and that's something you should be proud of, because whether it's like this, giant piece of art that like millions of people are flocking to, or whether, maybe 5 or 10 people buy your book within your first royalty check, at the end of the day, it's like you're still living out a purpose, and that is success
Yeah.
at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always hate this time of year because when you start doing your taxes, you have to start counting how many books you sold last year. So this is a good motivational talk for me.
Yeah, no, I get it.
So, what do you find is your biggest challenge to like sit down and get that book done?
My biggest challenge, honestly, like the only challenge I would say is like, that okay, I want to add this amount of content throughout the week, but sometimes like maybe there are things going on in your life maybe there's outside distractions. Most people do have day jobs, and we all have bills we need to keep up with. Um, so I would say like sometimes the distraction away from the fictional world you want to immerse yourself in may keep you away for a bit.
Mhm.
But I mean that stuff is temporary too, because at the end of the day, like every day, not every day is going to be the same in
Right.
terms of like when you sit down and work on the project. So I would say, yeah, the challenges that I would face would be like personal things sometimes getting in the way because, we're all adults and, we have adult responsibilities and, sometimes those things have to come first.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So do you have a second book in the works already? Or you
Oh, I'm
focused on?
already starting it.
All right.
Yeah, I'm working on the sequel to The Gift from Alias, and I'm working on another fiction book that's totally different, not sci-fi.
Okay. So jumping genres.
Yes, yes. I mean, it's going to be fiction, but yeah, this book is more of like literary fiction uh,
Okay.
with some speculative,
Yeah.
but it's more like just general fiction.
Awesome. I'm. I know there are a lot of authors who like to stick with the same genre. I'm a genre jumper as well. Um, I figure like because I have different stories I want to tell, and they're
Exactly.
not all the same.
You don't want to confine yourself to. I mean, it's cool. You have people that stick with one genre and they write like these beautiful series, but some people, like you and me, like we just have this passion for just creating stories, and it's almost like we don't want to entrap ourselves within like in a cell. It's
Yeah,
like okay, I have much more to talk about.
absolutely. So is your publisher accepting the sequel already, or you have to go through that process again with them?
I would have to go through that process with him. I
Yeah.
mean, I did mention shortly after the first book got published that I am working on a sequel,
Okay.
and when we cross that bridge,
Yeah.
I'm very excited for us putting that out there.
Cool. Very cool. Um, I just lost what I was going to say. So with your with the kind of literary fiction, speculative fiction, where are you getting your inspiration from? You don't have to go into the plot if you don't want to, if it's too early for that yet. But
I would say I get my inspiration from life in general, like just how we were talking about art.
yeah,
A lot of my motivation and inspiration to write these stories comes from music, movies, other people's stories. I feel like as authors, we're supposed to, and it does make sense to go that route, but like, I wouldn't say that there are other authors that like I go to for motivation for my own stories. I mean, that's just me.
yeah,
I tend to process art more deeply, while I'm just focusing on my own story while listening to music, certain scenes in movies, uh, and just life in general, like just my experiences, people who I grew up around, just taking those things.
yeah. So are, are you someone who you're walking around and you see something in a story, you start like building a story in your head based on a scene you see out on the street or
I,
driving by or
I would say it's more of it leaves an imprint in
okay.
my subconscious.
Yeah.
So it's like a memory bank of okay, when I have a cool idea for a story, that's something that will naturally come up from the memory bank. Like I feel like as I'm going about my day and whether it's a certain song I listen to or something that happens throughout my day, so it could be as simple as walking to work or just taking a walk in the park.
Yeah.
um, I would say it's more of the impressions that it leaves on me that ends up being used later on down the line.
Gotcha. All right, cool. Well, we are about out of time, so thank you. This has been great. Um,
Definitely.
let's go back to your two truths and a lie and see if we can noodle any which one is the lie. So I'll read them again, and then we'll let Brock um, make his guess, and I'll make mine. All right. So number one, I played in a pickup basketball game with Jamie Foxx. Number two, I did not go to my high school prom. And number 3, I found $50 under a vending machine once.
All right. Well, considering we started off hearing about your passion for basketball and the fact that you live in New York, I feel like there's a story there that legitimately happened with a pickup game with Jamie Foxx. So I'm going to say that's a truth. So I'm I don't have any way to distinguish between the other two, to be honest. I mean, you're a good looking guy, so I assume maybe you would, prom
I'm
wouldn't have been a
flattered.
challenge. Yeah, I mean, so I'm going to say it's the $50 under the
Okay, so you're saying the
vending machine.
$50 is the lie.
Yeah.
So I will. Same thing on the basketball. I mean, shoot, maybe it was a different. It wasn't. Maybe it wasn't Jamie Foxx. Maybe it was someone.
That could be
famous
it.
person,
That
who
could
knows?
be it too. Yeah.
But I'll go with the I didn't go to my high school prom as the lie.
Okay, can I reveal now?
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah.
All right, Brock, you're correct.
Oh, I needed that too.
Yes, you did.
All right. So you did not find $50, but we got it with just a couple minutes we have left. We got to hear this story, the pickup game. How'd that go down?
Yeah, so I used to go to Chelsea Piers Sports Complex near the West Side Highway in Manhattan, a huge sport complex. And basically, one day, I'm on the basketball court, and me and my friends, we're just shooting around on one of the baskets, and casually, Jamie Foxx just comes walking in with, I'm assuming it was some of his trainers. And at that place, people aren't really gonna go running and screaming. Like it's
Yeah.
kind of like a very high end gym. Like everybody's just kind of minding their own business.
Yeah.
Honestly, the reason why I was able to get in there is because I knew someone and I was kind of getting help with the payments. But yeah, he just walked in, and we just kept looking. And this was around the time he was in the Amazing Spider-Man 2 when he was Electrode. So I was like, oh my God, like this is crazy. Like, and we all gathered and we're like, hey, like you want to run a full court game? And I was on his team. And while I'm playing, like in my mind, I'm like, man, like I'm like playing basketball with Jamie Foxx, like passing him the ball. And what made that whole experience just like the cherry on the top of that was after the game, I go up to him, I shake his hand, just wanted to say, good game, and it's a pleasure to, meet you and, to compete with you. And he said, man, you're just so dominant. You got a lot of skills, keep it up. And I swear, like this smile never left my face. Like from when I left the gym on the trains coming home, I just had this high. So definitely a cool experience.
Man, what an amazing experience. That's awesome. And it sounds like he was a cool guy too, right?
Very, very nice guy.
Yeah,
Very
yeah.
nice guy.
Love it.
All right, so that gives you 1, Brock, and I'm still 5.
5. All right, I got 4 more to make up here.
I'm glad I could help, Rock. I'm glad.
Yeah, appreciate that, Mike. Appreciate that. Yeah.
All right. Well, Mike, thank you so much for being on the show. And for all of you out there watching or listening, please subscribe. Please share with your friends. Let them know. Check out Mike's books and put him as an author to look out for his future books as well. And we will catch you next time on the next episode of the Clean Library Podcast.